Okay, we got CG in the house. He says, the no sense yesterday, I guess you meant to say nonsense yesterday about the ring walk was ridiculous. Yeah, I saw David Hay do an interview on IFL this morning where he says that the situation is resolved. I'm guessing most of you already know about this. He says the situation is resolved. Derek Chisora's mum had to speak to him over the phone and convince him not to be silly. And was Derek Chisora really going to walk out? I would say no. Now, some people are saying this is a ruse by Derek Chisora and David Hay to just create controversy and either sell more pay-per-views because controversy sells, or to try and extort Eddie Hearn out of more money, because we know that Derek Chisora tried that before, right? Where he lied to Eddie Hearn and told him that he was ill or injured or something and he was going to pull out of a fight. And Eddie Hearn said, please, no, I'll pay you some extra money. Please fight. Now, obviously, that raises questions about Eddie Hearn, because why are you trying to pressure an injured fighter to get in the ring? But at the same time, after the fight, Derek Chisora said, actually, Eddie Hearn was the one who revealed that Chisora was injured. But then Derek Chisora flipped it on him and said, actually, Eddie, I wasn't really injured. I just told you that to get some more money out of you. So he hustled him. But I personally suspect that rather than it being a ruse, I mean, it could have been trying to get more money out of Eddie Hearn, but I suspect it was probably just Derek Chisora trying to get himself pumped up for the fight, because I said in a recent video that Chisora doesn't really, let me check my levels here. I want to make sure I'm not clipping. Chisora doesn't really, he doesn't really carry on with the antics that he used to, by way of slapping people and spitting in people's faces and all this kind of business. But actually, prior to the Usyk fight, if you guys remember, prior to the Usyk fight, he didn't try and start any beef with Usyk to get himself pumped up. He actually started some beef, or, had some tension with Coogan. And that was pretty funny. Coogan looked scared to death in that hotel room. Okay, we got Sebastian in the place. Big up Sebastian. We got Israel. We got Nassim from Paris. Big up. G-Man, yes. G-Man says a fighter who should be turning pro this year, Andy Cruz. Highly recommend you take a look. Really impressive stuff. He's a lightweight. Okay. Can you drop us a link, or drop me a link in the Discord server, G-Man, so I can have a look at this guy? Andy Cruz. Okay. Nassim says, Chisora always wants to be animated before fights. Parker was too nice and could not have answers, so he chose to fight for the ring walk. Yeah, that's what I suspect it is. Him trying to get himself psyched up. Parker was, as you say, good point, a bit too nice, and Derek Chisora didn't have any energy to feed off. So he tried to create his own energy over the ring walk business. Big up Mark S. He says, imagine having to call your mum to sort it out at 38 years old. Indeed. CG says, I'm tired of Katie Taylor butt kissing. Yeah, it's a bit much on Sky. Joe says, when Sky and BT signed a cross-licensing agreement for the football, the rationale for keeping it going fell away. It makes little to no profit for them. Hopefully, a terrestrial channel will bid for the boxing now. Yeah, I guess that's in reference to the news that BT Sport is looking to sell its sports division. And, the interesting thing about selling its sports division is who's going to buy it? There's been rumors about DAZN and what have you. But if DAZN buy it, does that mean that Frank Warren is then going to be a DAZN promoter? What's going to happen there? It's going to be interesting to see. Israel says this might be Chisora's last fight on a big platform, as no one will want to deal with his unpredictability. I think a lot of people have been very close. I mean, Frank Warren washed his hands of Derek Chisora a long time ago. And I'm pretty sure that Eddie Hearn, David Haye, and all involved are at their wits' end with Derek Chisora as well. Sebastian said, did anyone watch Sonny Edwards last night? I didn't actually watch Sonny Edwards. I know that he won a world title against some South African guy, I believe. Big up Jay. He says, Hatman, who do you think wins right now if you had to pick between Ennis and Virgil Ortiz? Right now, I would pick Ennis. I'm massively impressed by Ennis. Ortiz looks good too, but I haven't been as impressed by him as I have by Ennis. And as Sebastian said, Ennis seems to be a lot bigger. He's a very big welterweight. Very long arms and just looks physically very imposing. Big up Joseph. He says, without a rematch, what does Canelo have to do to be considered the better fighter than Floyd Mayweather? You know, that's a good question. And it's a question which can be a bit puzzling. It's like with Manny Pacquiao. People say, what does he have to do to be considered better than Mayweather, despite the fact that he lost to Mayweather? But of course, he's a naturally smaller guy who came up from, what was it, flyweight originally? So I guess you can judge him a bit differently. Canelo, what would he have to do to be considered better than Mayweather? You tell me. I haven't really thought about it that deeply, but let me know what you think he would have to do. Or maybe you think he already could be considered better than Mayweather. See, here's one of the things, though, about Canelo when you're comparing him to Mayweather. Other than the first Castillo fight, and maybe the De La Hoya fight, Mayweather really never had any contentious decisions. I know some people say the first Maidana fight, but for me, Mayweather won both Maidana fights comfortably on the scorecards. I didn't think there was any issue at all with regards to Mayweather winning. But the De La Hoya fight was relatively close, and of course the first Castillo fight, a lot of people feel like he lost. Whereas with Canelo, he's had numerous fights that were very close and decisions went his way. For example, the Austin Trout fight, I felt like that was a very, very close fight. Could have gone either way. Of course, he got a scorecard in his favor against Mayweather. One of the, well, I can't say in his favor, but one of the judges had it a draw, right? And also the Erislandy Lara fight, a lot of people believe Lara won it. Even the Miguel Cotto fight, for me, the scorecards were horrendous in that fight. So he's had multiple fights where the decisions have been questionable. And maybe you have to factor that in when it comes to comparing his resume and his legacy to Mayweather. Joseph says, without a rematch, what does Canelo... Okay, sorry, I just read that. Israel says, Spencer Theron said AJ will still be on Sky Sports. If AJ and White remain on Sky, will DAZN still be value for money if they raise the subscription to, say, £10? Spencer Theron doesn't work for Sky anymore. I know he has a lot of links, you know, on the inside and whatnot. But is he really going to have the full inside track in terms of where AJ and Dillian Whyte would be going, because according to the reports, AJ's contract and Dillian Whyte's contract have to be negotiated. So that isn't to say that they're definitely going to stay with Sky. That means it's up in the air with them too. It's just that they're not included in Eddie Hearn's DAZN deal. I personally hope and pray that they both go to DAZN. But as far as DAZN being value for money, if they raise the subscription to £10, is it still value for money? I would say so, yes. Yeah, I would say so. You're still going to get Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin and countless other fighters. It's still value for money, yeah. All the international content and Eddie Hearn shows other than AJ and Dillian Whyte. But let's hope eventually AJ and Dillian Whyte do end up on DAZN as well. Because in the short term, I expected the AJ Fury fights to land on Sky. I expected that Sky BT, cross promotion, cross network situation. And as far as Dillian Whyte, I mean, maybe he'll have at least one more fight on Sky. Will he then look to cross over to DAZN? Dillian Whyte's really all about his business. So whoever's giving him the best offer, I'm sure Dillian Whyte is going to want to go there. If DAZN say, hey, Dillian, we're going to pay you more than Sky can pay you, you really think he's going to turn it down as long as he's out of contract or whatever? I doubt it. Big up Stella. Joe says, when is that new boxing game for console being released? It looks decent. Yeah, I've seen it. Isn't Eddie Hearn involved in that new boxing game? I'm not sure when it's going to be released. Big up Graham Coleman. He says, what's good? So happy I have DAZN here in Germany. There's no pay-per-view for me. Indeed. Somebody in the Discord was saying that if you use a VPN, you can actually purchase the American DAZN. I guess the code or something, or I don't know how it's actually done, but somebody in the Discord was saying you can in the UK with a VPN sign up for the American DAZN and get all the UK pay-per-views that way. It's like £20 or whatever. $20. Duncan says, what you cooking? Homemade lasagna or something? Nah, it was literally just a very big salad. Took me a while to eat. Ethan says, Billy Joe Saunders versus Mayweather at 160. I'm going to say Mayweather. Joe says, Tristics and asks the most run-of-the-mill questions. Yeah, he's one of those old school journalists, he's not one of the guys like Coogan or, some of these social media YouTube interviewers who get a bit more personal with the fighters and have more banter with them. I know he's trying to move in that direction, but he comes from a more traditional journalistic background. So he's still a bit stiff and wooden, do you know what I mean? And the questions he poses and all that kind of business. But I did like the interview that he did with Adam Booth a couple years back. And also the interview that he did with George Groves I thought was good too. Big up Gennady in the house. G-Man says, Chris Eubank versus Ty and Booth's leftovers. Yeah, thanks for that. Wouldn't it be crazy if Marcus Morrison actually beat Eubank? And it's not beyond the realms of possibility, to be honest. I mean, Eubank really should be beating Marcus Morrison and beating him handily. But Eubank has been out the ring for, 2 years? I'm not sure how long Morrison's been out the ring for. But he's been out the ring a long time. We got Misha in the house. We got Prav. We got Outmatch Boxing. Yes, yes. That's Sonny there. Big up, Sonny. Graham says, I wonder what numbers this Ruiz fight will do. No way you can watch the fight in Europe. Stream team all the way. G-Man says, I can't wait for DAZN to start their UK shows. Sky have been unbearable lately. How many Ricky Hatton MEN references will Adam Smith drop tonight when Campbell fights? Stella says, Hatman, how do you feel about Andy Ruiz weighing at 256? Are you happy with him at that weight? Should he go lower? I think that he should stay at, I think that's a good weight for him for now, to see where he's at, to see how he performs at 256. It's very interesting that Chris Arreola has come in at like 228, the lightest of his whole career. I'm thinking Chris Arreola might actually try stick and move. Because is he really going to try and stand and trade? Maybe he will. You know, maybe he wasn't keeping an eye on his weight. He was just training to be fit. But perhaps it's also strategic. You know, there's a possibility that Arreola thinks he's going to try and do what Anthony Joshua did. Hit and hop it. Now, being a Mexican and it being a pay-per-view, it's not going to be very popular with the fans, is it? If Chris Arreola decides to try and stick and move. But at 228, I mean, it's an eyebrow raiser. So, yeah, let's see what Andy Ruiz can do. Obviously, he's been working on his leg strength. I know he's been lighter than this in the past, by the way. Andy Ruiz was as light as 246 much earlier on in his career. And a lot of people say that he wasn't as strong when he used to come in lighter before. But was he losing the weight the right way? Because, you know, Andy Ruiz, as far as I can tell, he hasn't been in an elite training camp before. I know he was up in Big Bear for a little bit, but with that aside, he's never really been in an elite training camp, or at least he's never tried to train like an elite athlete before, whereas now he is with Canelo and whatnot. So he's been working on strength and conditioning. He's been working on getting the weight down. He's clearly added muscle and lost fat. So, and hopefully, because it's been a long time since his last fight, he's lost the weight the right way. Whereas in previous years, you know, early on in Andy Ruiz's career, maybe he was coming in a bit drained, eating far less calories than he's used to, and maybe crash diets and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting to see how Andy Ruiz looks. And if he looks good at this weight and feels like he can trim a bit more off, because I heard him talk about coming in maybe in the 240s. If he can get down into the if he can get down to like 240 and he's strong, I mean, that'll be much better. You know, because 256 is still pretty high for a guy who's, what, 6'1", 6'2"? If you can get down even lower than that, 240, and be strong at that weight, he could be a problem. I agree with Stella. Sky's got to go. We need to get them out of this marketplace. Get everybody on DAZN. Charlie says, who you got winning between Chisora and Spider-Man? I think Chisora will get him, you know. When you look at Parker's record, the people that he's beat, like Carlos Takam, like Andy Ruiz, you know, he's beating guys like that. He should be beating Chisora, right? Just based on that. Takam is even stronger than Chisora is. We saw that when they fought. And he applies relentless pressure. Andy Ruiz is also a pressure fighter with much faster hands than Chisora, more skillful really than Derek Chisora, at least on his offense. Defensively, Derek Chisora can be halfway decent at times. He moves his head a lot more than Andy Ruiz for sure. But offensively, Chisora is unsophisticated compared to Andy Ruiz. So I think Parker should be winning this fight. Maybe a close split decision or something like that in a rough one. Del Boy has to take it to him, which I'm sure he will. But he needs to be careful not to get reckless. So I would go with Parker winning this fight. I'm definitely not counting Del Boy out because Parker doesn't like a rough fight. We've seen that when he fought Dillian Whyte. And even at times in the Takam fight, he looked a bit uncomfortable. So I want to say maybe 60-40 in Parker's favor, 55-45, something like that. So it's not insurmountable odds for Chisora whatsoever. He can definitely win this fight, but I do favor Parker. Marquez says, objectively speaking, if you're being a stickler for records, you could simply say the fact Mayweather has never had a loss makes him above Canelo. Indeed, Prab says Canelo is operating at a much higher weight than Mayweather. So why do people try comparing the two? Marquez says Andy Ruiz, same weight as he was when he fought Parker. He looks like he has stronger legs. So maybe more power. Well, possibly more power, but I'm more looking at better movement, because if you look at Andy Ruiz in those training videos, he's able to move around a lot better now because he's strengthened his thighs. Because when you're carrying 250 plus pounds about, when you start bending your knees and coming in, trying to come underneath punches and crouch, that's gonna wear on your legs. It's gonna make you real tired. Your legs are gonna get tired when you're carrying all that weight. And that's one of the reasons Andy Ruiz fights straight up a lot of the time. There's very little bending at the knees with Ruiz, very little bending at the waist. And as I've said before, that's because he's so heavy. If he can lose some weight, and of course they've strengthened the legs as well, then maybe he'll be able to get lower, move his head better, and move around the ring more quickly with the strengthened legs. So that's what I'm looking for in this fight. G-Man says, how do you rate Campbell Hatton? I give him the benefit that it was his pro debut, but I saw a very crude fighter. He needs building and a lot of work. Yeah, he needs years of building. He looks so crude. He looks so raw. He looked like a guy who only had, 2, 3, 4 amateur fights? That's how he looked to me. I don't know how many amateur fights he's actually had. Is it 20 or 30? I'm not sure, but he looked very, very crude and uncultured. Very, very raw. I can't remember the last time I saw somebody on their debut look that crude. Conor Benn certainly looked much better than that on his debut, and he had a similar amount of experience to Campbell Hatton in terms of amateur experience. So he looked very, very crude. Outmatch says Hatton looked even worse than expected. He still needs time, but I was shocked by how bad he was. Me too. I was shocked at how bad he looked. Joseph says, watch the Whyte Joshua amateur fight again for the first time in years. How on earth was Whyte bouncing around like Ray Leonard? His style has changed so dramatically. Indeed, it has. And I can only say the main reason is because Dillian Whyte was much lighter then. Dillian Whyte was probably 20 pounds lighter in that amateur fight against AJ than he is now. Early on in Dillian Whyte's pro career, when he was still using that jacked 3D over-the-counter supplement, he was in the 230s for some of those fights. So Dillian Whyte in the 230s, he's going to be able to bounce around. But when he's in the 250s and 260s and 270s, nah. He's not getting up on his toes at that kind of weight. Graham Coleman says, interested to see what DAZN UK setup is going to be like. Will Fastcar take up all his Sky mates along like Tony, Carl, Spencer? I hope they get some fresh faces in, to be honest. I mean, I don't mind them bringing people like Bellew, and I actually quite like Froch. He trolls the public. So Bellew, Froch, Spencer, I guess Spencer Oliver, you're talking about there. I don't mind those guys too much, but I'd like to see some fresh faces. I'd like to see some people who understand the modern audience, the boxing audience, not the mainstream virtue signaling audience, but the boxing audience a bit better. G-Man says, Andy Ruiz weighing in at 256. Bear in mind he's put a lot of muscle on his legs, and indeed he has. Israel says, did you hear the reason Eubank Jr. and Adam Booth parted ways on AFL TV? What do you make of it? Yeah, I did. It was about the Michael Venom Page sparring. It sounds like diva business from Eubank, doesn't it? And Adam Booth wasn't impressed by the diva behavior, so he was like, you know what? I'm gone. Outmatch Boxing says, Ruiz Arreola on pay-per-view is scandalous. Indeed it is. CG says, why is Fitzgerald fighting at 168? He's normally a 154 pounder. I think it's just because he doesn't want to make weight. He just wants to be able to come back and not have to be stressed. I think he's coming back from like mental health problems and what have you. So he doesn't want to be stressed out with trying to make the weight. He just wants to fight at whatever weight he's walking around at currently. And I guess he's walking around over 160. So that's the weight they've made his comeback fight at. And it's just a relatively weak opponent as far as I'm aware. Marquez says, Parker just never has any venom. He has all the fundamentals, but no animal instincts. It's really frustrating to watch. CG says I got Parker on points. Yeah, that's what I would go for. If push came to shove, I'll go for that. Charlie says, who in the current boxing world, is your favorite style-wise? Who's my favorite style-wise? I think Ennis has got to be up there. Truth be told, Ennis has got to be up there. I mean, I really haven't seen that much of him other than a couple of fights, but he has impressed me massively. So he might be right up there in terms of my favorite style-wise. Ennis. Also, Jared Anderson. I really like Jared Anderson's style at heavyweight. So those two. I like Canelo's style. I've always liked Canelo's style. Who else now? Babbage. Obviously not for the technical ability, but just for the entertainment value. I love the Savage. The Primarch Joe Frazier or the Primarch Mike Tyson. Can't wait to see the Savage back in action. I hope they make the Nick Webb fight. I think that's an intriguing fight. Nick Webb coming off a good win against Pfeiffer. A fight which I didn't expect him to win, to be honest, because Pfeiffer had the amateur pedigree and Nick Webb has been beaten by people like Dave Allen. Sokolovsky stopped him, didn't he? Stopped Nick Webb. I know Sokolovsky's a dangerous guy. We saw that against Adelaide, but he never cleaned Adelaide out. So Nick Webb coming back the way he did to beat Pfeiffer, I was surprised. So let's see him in there. I'm sure his Confidence is a lot higher now. So let's see him in there against the Savage and see how that goes. In fact, what do you guys think about that? Nick Webb versus the Savage. Craig says, I've heard that Hearn is bankrolling the esports boxing club game behind the scenes. Yeah, that's the rumor. Outmatch Boxing says Morrison is the kind of fight you'd expect to see Eubank in back when he was fighting on Channel 5. That's true. That's 100% true. 100% true. It's like a Mick Hennessy type opponent, isn't it? Prav says Eubank Jr. is doing the right thing, having a tune-up fight. Outmatch Boxing says, I can feel a late stoppage for Parker. I think this might be the end of Del Boy. Yeah, and Del Boy was hurt in the Usyk fight. I don't care what nobody says. He got hurt in that fight. It was around the 6th round or something like that, and Usyk hit him with some straight shots. And Del Boy looked ready to go to me, but Usyk didn't step on the gas. Jay says, Hatman, what did you do at the gym? I just did a whole heap of bag work. Whole heap of bag work. I'm trying to drop some lockdown weight. So when I get back into the gym, the first thing I try to do is loads of bag work, because that's how I actually lose weight the quickest, is hitting a bag. Because I'll go in there and I'll hit the bag for an hour, and when I'm in shape, I'll hit the bag for 2 hours straight. You know what I mean? Well, when I say straight, I mean there's the 1 minute breaks in between rounds, but I'll go for 2 hours in a bag. Dan Heaney says Jake Paul looked way better than Campbell Hatton. Hey, that's true. You are absolutely right, Dan. You are absolutely right. Jake Paul looked way better than Campbell Hatton. And Jake Paul's got less experience than Campbell Hatton. Very good point. Prav says, do you think we could ever see Conor Benn go up to middleweight in a couple of years and fight Eubank Jr., or do you think he will always be too small? I mean, boxing is a crazy sport, so you can never say never, but I would have thought that Conor Benn is way too small to be fighting Eubank Jr. I've seen both of them in person. Conor Benn is tiny, and Eubank Jr. is, I don't want to say he's big, but he's relatively, I mean, he must be at least 5'11", 6 foot, Eubank Jr. He's at least 5'11", 6 foot tall, something like that. Conor Benn, what is he, 5'8", at best? And the body size between the two guys is vastly different. I'm sure Conor Benn would probably be up for it. But I'd be surprised if that fight happens. CG says they need to bring Marko Kalic back for these light heavyweights. Yeah, because he did real good against Boatsy. He busted up his eye. So I'd like to see him back too. Eddie Hearn normally does bring them kind of people back. But Frank Warren has got most of the light heavyweights in the UK now, hasn't he? He's got Anthony Yard, Lyndon Arthur, and now Callum Johnson. Okay, what do I think about Spider? Or what does Craig Richards need to do to win his fight tonight? Gosh, what does he need to do? I don't think there's much he can do with the attributes he has. I mean, I haven't seen that much of Spider. I've seen a few of his fights, and there's nothing that I've watched previously that would lead me to believe he can beat Bivol. Bivol must have seen the Craig Spider Richards style, that type of fighter, dozens and dozens of times in fights, in the amateurs, to some degree in the pro game, and certainly in the gyms over the years. So I'm not sure what Spider can do, to be honest, with the attributes he has. It's not like he's a devastating puncher. It's not like he's got some type of ability which is unusual. I know people are saying he's looking great in the gym and what have you. Maybe he can upset the odds, we'll see, but it would be a surprise to me. CG says, I think Babbitt should fight Wack for his development. Yeah, Wack is a real big punching bag. Babbitt would do amazingly well to stop him, given the size differential and how tough Marius Wack is. I know Marius Wack has been stopped a couple times where he quit on his stool, but he's never been down in a fight. Outmatch Boxing says, I think Webb would be savaged by Babbitt. Mike says, good afternoon, gents. Have you ever thought of doing a series on 90s heavyweight boxing the way you did the long vid on Mike Tyson's career? That's an interesting idea. I might look at that. Graham Coleman says, I remember taking Jack 3D back in my hardcore bodybuilding days, and it was rocket fuel. Yeah, I heard this. I know they still sell Jack 3D, but they changed the formula. They changed the ingredients. But back when Dillian Whyte was taking it, before it got banned and whatever, I read people, talking about taking it, and they said it was literally rocket fuel. Yeah, I've heard the exact same thing as Graham is saying. CG says, yes, Chisora got hurt bad and got pushed back to the ropes. Usyk broke his left hand in that fight. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, maybe that's why I didn't go for it then. Graham says, you heard about Michael Hunter missing a drug test. Yes, I did. Please don't mess this up for us, Michael. We want to see this fight. Don't mess this up for us. Apparently he's come out and said, there was a genuine reason for it and whatnot. Well, he better not miss the next test. That's all I'm saying. He better not miss the next one. Our match says Ben is built like a schoolboy in person. He really is. Like, Conor Ben is tiny. He is tiny. Graham Coleman says, what a promoter Eddie is to be able to sell Chisora on pay-per-view, even though it's a trash box office event. Indeed. Our Match Boxing says Richards needs a miracle. Graham says, wasn't they talking of Wilder leaving Shelley Finkel? What happened there? No idea what's going on there. I mean, I haven't heard anything from Finkel, and I haven't heard anything more about that situation. So, good question, but I have no idea what's going on. I'd like to know myself. Israel says, imagine Marius Wack versus Brazil. Now that would be a snooze fest for sure. How Much Boxing says, Graham Coleman, you need jacked to get through all those Bloodborne playthroughs. Dan Heaney says, the main problem with the card tonight is the undercard doesn't even have 50-50s. You really need that when the headline is fairly weak. Indeed. Prav says, Fury is throwing some serious stones from his glass house trashing Eddie Hearn when he signed to Frank Warren. Yeah, of course he is, but I think he's trying to wind Eddie Hearn up and he's being successful. Eddie Hearn's taking the bait in some of the interviews I've seen. Sorry there, people. I had to mute the mic while I did one of those random coughs that I'm famous for. But yeah, Fury likes to wind Eddie Hearn up and mess with his mind and, you know, live in his head rent free. Fury likes doing all that. Because, of course, when Frank Warren was heavily favoring Daniel Dubois over Joe Joyce when he promotes them both, and Tyson Fury's cool with Joyce, right? But you didn't hear Tyson Fury saying, come on, Frank, do you promote Joe Joyce or what? You didn't hear Tyson Fury saying that. CG says White will never get down to the lower weights because he gets quite big in between fights. You know, even though Dillian Whyte is not aesthetically athletic, and he's not athletic in general, but the point I'm trying to get is Dillian Whyte does a lot of resistance training. You know, he does a lot of deadlifts and weightlifting and bench presses and all this kind of stuff. And he's put a lot of muscle on. I know it doesn't look like it because he's carrying a lot of body fat, but Dillian Whyte has put a lot of muscle on. If you look at him early on in his career, yeah, he was muscular then, but not as bulky as he is now. So I think if Dillian Whyte just laid off the resistance training and put more emphasis on doing boxing training, just like AJ did for the Ruiz rematch, I think we could see Dillian Whyte come in a lot lighter. But he put so much emphasis on being able to lift loads of weight and all this kind of business. Spends time doing that, you know, trying to be physically strong. And there are different kinds of strength. There's a strength where you can lift heavy weights in the gym. And then there's a strength where when you're in the ring, you can have the energy to be able to break free from clinches, to be able to move around the ring and hit really hard because your balance is good and your rotation is good. Mike Tyson, by all accounts, you know, I'm talking about the prime Tyson, not the Tyson after prison, who was doing a lot more weightlifting and what have you. But prior to prison, a prime Mike Tyson hardly did any weights at all. The only weights he ever said he did was some shrugs. He'd do like 50 shrugs with some dumbbells. And shrugs are obviously to strengthen your trapezius muscles and your neck muscles. But he said that he didn't do weights, and I believe him. You look at the size of him when he was a kid. I mean, he's just built very, very bunchy, very muscular and strong. So he was fighting people like Frank Bruno, who was well into weights. I'm sure Frank Bruno at the time could have outbenched Mike Tyson and could have lifted more and, you know, done better squats and deadlifts and all this kind of stuff in the gym. But in the ring, Tyson's energy translated into strength. Do you understand? Sometimes when a guy has more energy than you, it doesn't really matter what you can lift. If his energy is extremely intense, he can still overpower you. So that kind of energy, that intense energy, that fighting energy comes from being at your optimum weight. Or it certainly helps when you're at your optimum weight, when you're not carrying excess fat, excess muscle, and so on. And Mike Tyson exemplified that, right? In terms of intense fighting energy. Has there ever been a heavyweight who is as intense as Mike Tyson? Probably not. Probably not. Joe Frazier was more relentless than Tyson. Rocky Marciano was relentless too. But in terms of intense bursts of energy, Mike Tyson's probably top of the totem pole when it comes to that. And this is a guy who didn't do weights in his prime. And he was fighting some guys who did. And he was overpowering them. Joseph says, have you ever thought about doing a Wilder fanboy version of your famous Floyd is Jesus? Yeah, people have said this to me before. I actually haven't, because I don't actually watch the Wilder fanboy channels. So I wouldn't really be able to, copy them, or what's the word I'm looking for? Imitate them. I wouldn't really be able to. I'm not sure how they talk, to be honest. I don't watch them Wilder fanboy channels. Whereas back in the days, I did watch a few of the Mayweather fanboy channels. Once they turned into Mayweather fanboys, I stopped watching pretty quickly. But I did see a lot of the Mayweather fanaticism back then. CG says AJ looks focused for the Fury fight. I think he will be improved quite a lot on fight night. I suspect you're right, you know. In terms of AJ's demeanor, the way I'm seeing him look in training, I like what I see. He seems very focused and very confident to me. Duncan says the first time I heard of Jack 3D was the day before it was banned, as they made an ingredient in it prescription only. I believe it was DMMA and was a geranium root or something. Interesting. Was very powerful. Yeah, evidently so. I mean, look at Dillian Whyte's physique prior to the ban, and then compare it to his physique after the ban. And then you'll see how powerful that Jack 3D was. I guess it's actually called Jacked, right? We keep calling it 3D, but they've just used the E as an inverted, they've just used a number 3 as an inverted E. I guess it's just supposed to be pronounced Jacked. CG says Beterbiev has both types of strength. He's a beast. He has both types of strength, but he doesn't have the intensity of a Mike Tyson. You know, Mike Tyson when he would attack you, it was so intense. He was like a threshing machine. Like, go and watch the 5th round of Tyson against Frank Bruno. That's what I'm talking about. Like, the intensity when Mike Tyson attack you, there's no other heavyweight I've seen that could attack in such intense bursts. Again, he wasn't as relentless as somebody like Frazier. There were long stretches in Mike Tyson fights where not much was happening, where Tyson was laying around to the inside and he wasn't really working much. And I'm talking about prime Tyson. But once he turned it up into the highest gear, he was just unbelievably intense. Outmatch Boxing says, yeah, White does a lot of weight training, but he has so many postural and biomechanical issues. I wouldn't be surprised if injuries ruin his career. Yeah, he does have postural and biomechanical issues, and those issues are compounded by being heavier than you need to be. You know, when you are at your optimum weight and you're not carrying loads of excess muscle or fat, your balance tends to be better. You know, you throw shots and you're not going off balance as much. Your form tends to be better. Graham Coleman says, bricked up on IFL this morning, slamming Eddie over the Canelo Billy Joe Saunders situation. The way Umar sucks up to Frank Warren is unbearable. So afraid to ask difficult questions. Yeah, it's true, but in all fairness, if you ask difficult questions of Frank Warren, he might just not give you any more interviews. That's the kind of guy he is. So Devin says, have you heard of Jalalov? Yeah, I actually did a post-fight review for one of his fights recently on that show, in that Matchroom show in Uzbekistan. Yeah, so I did watch him. Big 6'7" South. Yes, I watched him. He fought some road sweeper on that show. Prav says, did you watch Prince Patel's interview with IFL a few weeks ago? It always feels like Coogan is on edge with what Patel may say. Yeah, I watched some of it. I didn't watch the whole thing. Once I realized that Patel wasn't going to troll Coogan again, I kind of had to switch it off. Because let's be real, that's why we tuned in. We wanted to see Prince Patel do the same thing. Prav says David Hayes gone gray overnight. Yeah, I was just saying this to my girlfriend the other day. David Hayes all of a sudden got a gray beard. It just happened overnight. Like 1 week, his beard is all black. Maybe he's been dyeing it. Maybe that's what it is. David Hay is the same age as me. We were born in the same year. And I've got, I think, 2 gray hairs. So some people, they go gray more easily than others. And my dad, who is in his 70s, I'm not even sure if he has any gray hairs. And he's in his 70s. He's got a full head of hair. And if he does have any grays, they're very few. I mean, very few. You'd have to look close. You'd have to inspect his scalp closely to see if he has any hair, any gray hair, excuse me. Israel Lucan says, have you watched a Nigerian LDBC YouTube channel called Boxing Block Center? I haven't watched any of their videos, but I might have watched the what's that Frank Warren heavyweight, Nigerian heavyweight, British Nigerian heavyweight who just fought Sokolovsky. I forget his name. Adelaide. I think he might have uploaded the Adelaide fight to his channel because somebody gave me the link to the Adelaide fight, and it was on some boxing YouTuber's channel. So he might have been the guy, but I don't watch his videos normally. That's the first video of his I ever watched, and it was a fight. And I muted it, so I wasn't even listening to his commentary over it. All right, be back in a second, people. Hold tight. Just going to mute the mic for a second. In fact, give me 5 minutes, people. Be back in 5 minutes or so. Won't be too long. Okay, I'm back. Where was I? Yeah, Hayes gone grey overnight, indeed. Yeah, Patel did mention some Ty and Booth catchphrases to try and get to Coogan a little bit. Graham Coleman says Coogan didn't ask Patel about the L he picked up. Outmatch Boxer says I'm 22 and I got 4 grays. I need a holiday. You know, some of it might be linked to whether you drink alcohol. I know that, like, for example, pattern boldness and, you know, getting grades and stuff like that, a lot of it is hereditary. But I think some of it can be brought on by dietary factors, environment, and drinking. For example, a friend of mine, he started going grey in his late 20s, and now he's got loads of greys in his hair. His dad, who is in his, I guess he must be in his late 50s, he doesn't have any grey at all. And also, riddle me this. I'm sure they're going to say it's linked to testosterone or something. How come women hardly ever go bald? Have you ever contemplated why that is? Because balding is really a male thing. You don't find that many women. I know there are some, but generally speaking, women don't go bald anywhere near as often as men do. Joseph says, who's physically stronger, a Collie or Wilder? I probably have to say Wilder. CG says, Hatman prediction on Canelo Billy Joe. I've got Canelo on a legitimate decision. Yeah, I think Canelo decision or late stoppage. Durrell says, Hatman, how's the hairline? The hairline's good, same as it was last time. Completely bald. Uh, Graham says, Hatman, have you ever thought about doing live commentary for us patrons? Always enjoyed that. Yes, I will be getting back to doing that. I will be getting back to doing that. Although, once I move to Africa, which is going to happen this year, um, I don't know whether I'll be doing that many live streams once I move to Africa because the internet connection might not be good enough. Obviously, I'm going to try and find the best internet I can possibly get, but I'm making some inquiries in terms of how good it is out there for live streaming. Joseph says, yeah, I'm 29 and I got grays in my beard and head. It's peak. Yeah, it could be the alcohol though, because I've never really been a big drinker. I have drunk alcohol, obviously, you know, throughout I mean, my parents used to give me a little bit of alcohol here and there. You know, like birthdays and Christmas and whatever when I was a kid, you'd have a little sip of it. In fact, the first time I ever tasted alcohol was when I was a little boy and my dad used to drink like beer in the house. And one time I asked him, like, I want to taste what you're drinking. I can't have been any more than, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. And my dad let me, you know, sound like terrible parents, right? But my dad, because my dad knew that I'd be disgusted by the taste. So he let me, you know, just put my tongue on the drink, right? And it was disgusting. That's the first time I tasted beer. I might have been 3, 4 years old or something like that. And the next time I tasted alcohol, I might have been 8, 9. My parents would allow us to have a little bit of alcohol at Christmas when I was like 8, 9 years old, like a tiny little shot of Bailey's or something. Do people still do that kind of thing? I remember hearing from a Scottish person one time about how they used to help their kids sleep at night by by dipping their dummy in whiskey. All kind of crazy stuff like that. CG says, I hope Andrade moves up and becomes mandatory for the Canelo Billy Joe Saunders winner. I wouldn't rule him out. Apparently he's struggling to make 60 as well. Yeah, so I heard. So I heard. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to open this live stream up. Now that I've got through all your questions, I'm going to open this live stream up to the public. So strap in and hold tight, because we might get all kind of funny characters coming into the chat in just a second. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it open to the public. I might end the stream in pretty short order if there's too many jokers, because you know trolls are going to come in. Devin says, open the floodgates. Yeah, let's see how many trolls come in. Maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe there won't be as many trolls. Let's see. But last time I was doing these live streams, oh God, you get so many trolls. Just weirdos, you know, people saying weird stuff. So here we go. Let's open it up. Let's open it up. And as I open it up, let me just change the graphics on here. Just bear with me a sec. Oh, okay, yeah, the Emma Williams situation. The Emma Williams situation. He appears to just be a bit mentally ill. I know some people want to read more deeply into it, but we can only speculate when it comes to that. But apparently Emma Williams recently broke up with his girlfriend, and he took it really badly. And a lot of people in this day and age are suffering from mental health issues. So Babatunde says that he really fancies Tasha Jonas. Okay, to each his own. You know my cup of tea. Devin Sinclair says Ammo sent shots at Eddie Hearn. Yeah, he did. He did. It was bizarre. I heard his rant and the stuff he said, and it was very strange. That's all I can say. Very weird, strange. Okay, we got the siren in the house. The siren says good morning. Not sure where you are in the world. Maybe it's morning where you are. Here in the UK, it's early afternoon. 1:10 p.m. to be precise. But shout out to the siren. Oh dear. Okay. See, I told you guys there'll be trolls in here right away. I told you. We're getting trolls in straight away. Zero there. Nathan says I'm in my mid-20s and my hairline's already messed up. Born a Blue TV, what's happening? Ryan MC, what's good? Leo Williams. Hugo Bossman, what's up? We got Tom N from Leeds. Big up Tom N. Stay Blessed, Be Real. Kira Malcolm. Spencer Gregory. Thoughts on Scott Fitzgerald? Our Tiger Tom says, can patrons still join the Discord server? Yes. I'll repost the Discord server link on Patreon after this stream in case you haven't got it. Because I think the link times out after a certain number of days or whatever it is. Our Spencer Gregory says, thoughts on Scott Fitzgerald? Apparently he's been suffering from mental health issues, and that's why he's coming back tonight for a little run out. So hopefully he's in a much better place now. They've made the fight at 168 and he's normally a 154 pounder because I guess they don't want him to have to stress about cutting weight when he's coming back from wherever he's coming back from. Stay Blessed in the house. Yes, yes. We got Curtis Mao, 87. Big up, love from Southend-on-Sea. I was in Southend-on-Sea so many times last year, 2020. It got to the stage where I virtually lived there. The amount of petrol I spent running back and forth from Southend, London to Southend, I was always there. So big up Curtis and big up Southend. The Southend crew. We got Joe Slater in the house. Papoose says, tell the troll them to hold some corn. Oh, wow. Carlton Palmer says, Fisheye says he's received the final site contract. Okay. Is this breaking news on IFL? Stay Blessed, Be Real says, is this your first live stream? Nah, I've done loads of live streams in the past, but it's my first live stream, my first public live stream for a long time. Aaron says, I want to make you some cash, Hatman. Bet on Staffron and Parker to both win by KO. Easy money. Straffon. Who is Straffon? Oscar says, from a psychological perspective, who has the advantage in the Fury versus Joshua fight? I tell you closer to the fight. CG says, I think Warrington gets splattered again by Lara. I think so too. I mean, I can only respect him for wanting to run it back right away and right what he feels is wrong. But based upon what I saw in that first fight, I think the same thing is going to happen. At least the same result is going to happen. You know, Josh Warrington has a very good engine. Maybe he'll just go in there and try and outbox Lara. You know, stay away, stick a move. Maybe he can win that way. But surely Lara, even if Josh Warrington decides not to engage and he's just trying to do what Anthony Joshua did against Ruiz, surely Lara's going to catch him again at some point and force him to fight. No? Maybe I'm underestimating Josh Warrington's ability to stick a move if he has to. Flavius Julius says, why is Canelo ducking Jake Paul? Shout out to Azzy. You got G Dorman in the house. Big up. Papoose, yes. Daniel, what's up? Exhibit. Greetings from Cyprus. Okay. All the way out there in sunny Cyprus. Big up Nick, Obi. Shout out to Nick. Who have I got in Parker Chisora? I got Joseph Parker. Mike says, Hatman, do you know of any GB boxers that we should look out for at the upcoming Olympics? I really haven't been following the GB boxers lately, and the Olympics might not be happening. The last news article I read about it said that the Japanese government is considering scrapping it altogether, which will be terribly disappointing for all the amateurs and, well, the athletes from all different sports. So let's hope it doesn't get cancelled. But I have to confess, I haven't been following any of the GB boxers. Obviously, they've had a long time out of the ring, all of them. Okay, big up Jamstar. He wants a shout out. Big up. Blue Collar Sports TV says Scott Fitzgerald seemed weird in that IFL interview. Looked and sounded different. I think he may be on medication. And if he is on medication, that could affect his performance. You know, when people are on like antidepressants or antipsychotics or whatever, it can affect them physically in terms of their athletic ability. So, we got Karma Serene in the chat. How you doing, Karma? Rob the Old Mongoose talking about collaborations. I will be doing some collaborations, so stay tuned. MT says, man like Hatman, Brixton all day. Yes, yes. Joe Milne says, I think Campbell Hatton could be as good as Ricky. Or do you think Campbell Hatton could be as good as Ricky? Based upon what I've seen so far, I would say absolutely not. Devin Sinclair says, I think Parker will absolutely batter Chisora. It will be close for about 5 rounds. And after that, Parker will start to pick him apart. Parker will TKO Chisora just with sheer volume. Chisora is finished. The Cali says, has Chisora pulled out? No, he hasn't. Papu says, was Hatman doing county lines to South End? Thankfully, there was no need for that. There was no need for that. All right, I'm going to have to skip some of the questions here, people, because there are so many. I don't want to get up to date. Pop out the chat box here. Okay, we got Hassan Ukar in the place. In response to Joe Slater, I didn't say who I'd be collaborating with. I just said I'd be doing some collaborations. I'll definitely be collaborating with Chris Andre. Chris Andre has been very busy. So, and I've been very busy myself, to be fair. We were going to collaborate a couple weeks back. But I'll definitely be collaborating with Chris Andre because he has great boxing knowledge and he is fantastic at doing technical breakdowns. Really, really good at that. So any of you who haven't yet watched Chris Andre and you haven't yet subscribed to his channel, what are you waiting for? Because I'm telling you now, if you haven't been watching Chris Andre's channel, very underrated, fantastic. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Chris Andre is like the best technical breakdowns on YouTube. Fantastic. So check out Chris Andre. I know his channel's not as big as some others and what have you, but it should be. Papu says, respect Hatman Cold Harbor Lane for life. Okay, Digweed says, Hatman, your videos have kept me going through lockdown, even though the missus raises eyebrows at boxing geekery. Yes, enjoy the Chris Andre recommendation. Hassan says, you have been missed, bro. Big up G-Man. Uthman Khan says, your view on Eddie and Billy recently. It's just typical boxing business, isn't it? A promoter who has he has a difficult job because Canelo Alvarez is a star and he wants to retain Alvarez. Alvarez is working with him on these little short contracts, 2-3 fights at a time. And Eddie is desperate to retain him because of what it means for his relationship with DAZN. If he can keep Canelo on DAZN with him, he's going to keep his bosses at DAZN happy. So obviously that's where Eddie's focus is. The criticism leveled at him by Tyson Fury, by Billy Joe, I think is probably valid. But at the same time, when it comes to Tyson Fury, he wasn't complaining about Frank Warren favoring Daniel Dubois, openly favoring Daniel Dubois over Joe Joyce, despite the fact that he promoted them both. So it's kind of selective outrage by Tyson Fury, isn't it? And as far as Billy Joe, I mean, you certainly can't be loyal to any promoter, be it Frank Warren, Eddie Hearn. And to be fair to Eddie Hearn, he has got Billy Joe this shot. Like, look at how long Billy Joe was with Frank Warren. Did Warren get him a shot at Canelo? Did Warren get him a shot at Triple G? No. So, as frustrated or mad as Billy Joe might be, as betrayed as he might feel, he's still getting the shot and he's still making more money. He's probably making more money from this fight than all of the fights he had with Frank Warren combined. You know, that's what we're talking about here. We got Paris Allen. A lot of people talking about Tyan. I'm watching the Tyan videos just like you guys are. Although I've noticed in some of Tyan's recent videos, he's having to self-censor a little bit because, you know, YouTube is very sensitive these days. We all know this, right? Extremely sensitive. So Tyan is having to speak in code a little bit here and there. As we all are. Freedom of Speech says Tyan doing plenty of fish lives. Can you do lives on plenty of fish? Or do you mean he's doing lives talking about plenty of fish? Man, those dating apps are so toxic. What does humanity come to when people, for through no fault of their own, to some degree, have to use these dating apps? Man, these dating apps are so toxic. Oh, Darrell says you can do lives on plenty of fish. Wow. Okay. Joe Briggs says do more fantasy fights. Crazy D3 says too many societies rejects on plenty of fish. And there's a lot of brasses on there. Isn't there? I said there's a lot of brasses on plenty of fish. Okay, Courtney Kettle says, what is your opinion on Freezy McBones? Freezy McBones, he's a light heavyweight amateur who is from Ghana. I think he came to the UK maybe around 2012, and he's been boxing as an amateur for about 4 or 5 years. What do I make of him? He's very enthusiastic. I know he's lost quite a few amateur fights. I think he's had like 6 losses or something as an amateur, and he used that to motivate himself. He's very wild, and he's gonna need to develop some more cultured technique if he's gonna go places, either in the amateurs or if he decides to turn over pro. But with the enthusiasm, with the hunger, with the heart that he seems to have, he might be able to do something in the pro ranks. But again, he's going to have to develop more cultured technique because he is very, very wild. And he's a big fan of Mike Tyson. That's clear from the way that he fights. But my experience over the years watching people who try to emulate the Customado Mike Tyson style, they usually fall flat on their face. In fact, they nearly always fall flat on their face in the pro ranks. So for him to not suffer the same fate, he might need to move away a little bit from the Customado Mike Tyson style. He needs to be open to coaches maybe changing his style a little bit. BH says, I guess the Derek ring walk was discussed. Yes, it was. Karma says, he told me he signed a contract with Sky Sports. Are you talking about Freezy here? Saying he signed a contract with somebody else? Daniel says, is Hatton fighting again tonight? I have no idea. Okay, Karma says yes. Oh, wow. He signed a contract with Sky Sports. Okay. Jared Thompson says the custom auto style is awkward. The custom auto style is very, very difficult to master. And all of the people I've seen over the decades who have tried to emulate the custom auto style, the Mike Tyson style, it has ended very badly for them in the pro ranks. Very badly. But like I say, Freezy has a lot of enthusiasm. He seems to have a lot of heart. He's got punching power there for sure. But the wildness needs to be tamed in terms of his technique. He throws big, wide hooks and wild shots. And as he steps up in levels, obviously people are going to be able to punch in between the shots and, you know. Okay, Newcast says, do you think black boxers try to emulate Mayweather too much? I get the sense that too many were inspired by a style that doesn't suit their bodies. Well, you know, this always happens when you have a very popular fighter like Mayweather is in the during their career and even in the immediate aftermath of their career, you get a lot of people trying to copy them. The same thing happened with Muhammad Ali. After Ali, I mean, even during Ali's time, his sparring partner, Jimmy Ellis, he was trying to be a carbon copy of Muhammad Ali. And throughout the 1980s, you had people from Greg Page to John Tate and many other fighters who clearly were trying to pattern their style on Muhammad Ali. They weren't as athletically gifted as Ali, but they tried to copy what he was doing. When Mike Tyson came along, you had a bunch of Mike Tyson copycats that sprung up out the woodwork. So this always happens. People copy to such a degree that they're even looking at the brand of gloves that their favorite fighter wears. So, for example, back in the 1980s and 1990s, there was far less diversity in terms of boxing glove brands. You had basically Cleto Reyes and Everlast that were head and shoulders above all the other brands in terms of popularity. And Mike Tyson preferred Everlast, whereas certain other fighters prefer Cleto Reyes. But because Mike Tyson was primarily fighting, well, nearly all his fights, he was wearing Everlast gloves, they became more popular than Cleto Reyes for a while. Mike Tyson went to prison. Then Cleto Reyes started becoming more popular again. Lennox Lewis would always wear Cleto Reyes fight gloves. You know, Roy Jones, many other fighters. Then in the late 90s, early 2000s, Grant came onto the scene. The first time I saw Grant boxing gloves, I think, was on the undercard of Tyson Holyfield, the first Tyson Holyfield fight, where I think Michael Mora and Francois Botha was wearing Grant gloves. If not, then it was definitely Henry Akinwande and Alexander Zolkin were wearing Grant gloves. And also Holyfield, for some of the latter fights of his career, he started wearing Grant gloves. Now, when Grant first came on the scene, a lot of people just said, well, these are Cleto Reyes clones. It just looks like, you know, some company has tried to emulate and completely copy what Cleto Reyes is doing. These are just Cleto Reyes knockoffs. So that's how most people viewed Grant gloves at the time. Winning is a Japanese brand which has been around, I think, since the 50s or the 60s or something like that. That's how long Winning have been around, making boxing gloves and all kinds of different fighting sports equipment. But nobody was wearing Winnings for all those decades. I think when Mike Tyson went to Japan for the Tony Tubbs fight, he might have used them in sparring or something out there in Japan. But other than that, Tyson had his own custom gloves. There was some old Latino guy in Brooklyn, I can't remember the guy's name, but he used to make custom sparring gloves for Mike Tyson. You know, like a tailor will make you custom clothes and whatever. This guy would make Mike Tyson custom gloves. But yeah, Winning were really not a big deal until Floyd Mayweather started wearing Winning. Really and truly. I know there were some other fighters that were wearing them and whatever, but they were pretty obscure. It was an obscure brand that nobody was wearing. I mean, you could have got yourself a pair back then, but because there wasn't a marquee fighter wearing them, nobody really took any interest in Winning gloves. Nobody took any interest in Grant gloves. Both those companies, Winning and Grant, owe Floyd Mayweather a lot, truth be told, in terms of their popularity. Because once Mayweather started wearing the Winning, he wore Winning fight gloves for a while, but then he switched over to Grant's. I guess he felt like the Winning fight gloves were a bit too easy on the opponent. You know, Grant fight gloves are a lot harder, but they're protective at the same time. As I say, once he switched over to those, and obviously now you've got the growth of social media and YouTube and all this kind of stuff, and behind the scenes, you're seeing Mayweather training all the time, you know, into the early 2000s, and particularly his run at welterweight, you're always seeing this training footage, him hitting the bag and the pads and trash talking to all the reporters, and you're seeing these Winning gloves for training and Grant gloves for fighting. And he must have boosted the sales for Winning and Grant beyond their wildest. I mean, they probably made more money, both of those companies, in the few years that Mayweather was at the top at 147. They must have made more money then than in the entirety of their company's history before. Because Mayweather was such a popular fighter. People want to be like whoever's the most popular or whoever's perceived to be the best. And therefore they get it in their heads that, oh, I need to have the same gloves as him. I need to have the same shoes, you know, boxing boots. I need to do everything like Mayweather, then maybe I can be as good as him. This always happens. Whereas Mayweather didn't have that kind of mindset, did he? Think about it. Mayweather, as good as he wasn't looking at whoever was the best at the time and thinking, okay, I need to wear the same gloves as them. I need to do this and that. Like, no, he went out there and found out what worked best for him. Cleto Reyes weren't working for him, and they were the popular gloves at the time. He was like, nah, I prefer Grant's actually. But most people and most fighters don't think like that. They just want to copy and emulate somebody else. So I can't remember how I got into this this chain of thought, but I'm actually going to do a glove review. I got loads of boxing gloves I'm going to get rid of in the next few weeks because I got too many. So I'm going to be selling some. But I just bought a new pair of boxing gloves I'll be reviewing. So hold tight for that. And what I want to tell you about gloves, anybody who actually is interested in boxing or interested in buying boxing gloves is try and get down to a shop where you can try the gloves on. Rather than hearing recommendations from people, try to get down to a shop where you can try them on. Because over the decades, I've found that the vast majority of gloves, for me personally, are very uncomfortable. Cleto Reyes obviously make high quality gloves in terms of the build. You know, they use very high grade leather, excellent stitching and so on. But the way a Cleto Reyes glove, and I'm talking about the training gloves, the sparring gloves, feel on the hand is butters. That's all I could tell you. It's butters the way they feel. Now, I know Cleto Reyes have apparently like improved their the shape of their gloves and the fit and feel or whatever in recent years. But for the longest time, for years and years and years, Cleto Reyes were the most uncomfortable, just butters feeling boxing gloves you could ever put on your hand. And yet, you know, people were ranting and raving about them. So just because something is popular, it doesn't mean it's going to be right for you. Get down to a Box Fit or Sugar Ray's, or, you know, if you live in the London area or wherever you live, get down to a boxing shop and actually try the gloves on. Like you would go to a shoe shop and try some shoes on, try the gloves on too. Because people are going to have different requirements. There is no such thing as the best boxing glove. Anybody who says that is talking out of their backside. There's no such thing. The best glove is whatever glove suits your requirements best. Whatever glove is most comfortable for you. Because I've tried on some gloves. For example, Fly is a British company that makes very high quality gloves. I went down to Box Fit last year with a view to probably buying a pair of Fly gloves. And I went down there and I tried on a few pairs of Fly and I didn't like them at all. I tried them. I just didn't like the fit of them, the way they were on my hand. I just did not like them. And I ended up buying another pair of Rival gloves instead. So, yeah. God knows how I got into this this chain of thought here. Eddie says, Champs Boxing is a decent shop in Kent, just outside London. He'll see you right. I tried all the gloves on in there. Okay, Louise says, any book recommendations? Funny you should say that, because I just got a book. Was it yesterday or the day before? Let me tell you the name of the book. I just started reading. And so far it's very interesting, but it's not for the faint-hearted. Right? This book is not for the faint-hearted. So if you have like a faint-hearted type of disposition, then stay away from this book. Where are we at? See, the book is in the other room here, but I did post about it on Discord. Shout out to everybody in the Discord server, by the way. On my Hatman and the Gang Discord server, there's like how many people in there now? About 250. That's where the party is, in the Discord server. Okay, yeah, the book. The book I'm going to recommend. But again, it's not for the faint-hearted. The book is called Programmed to Kill: The Politics of Serial Murder. All right, that's the name of the book. Programmed to Kill: The Politics of Serial Murder. And obviously it's about serial killers. And it's very grisly and gruesome and all that kind of business. But as you guys know, I'm very interested in human psychology. So that's one of the reasons that I purchased this book, to find out a bit more information about these serial killers and the backstory and whether there's more than meets the eye with regards to some of these cases. So yeah, that's the book I'm currently reading. Programmed to Kill: The Politics of Serial Murder. Bit of light reading there. Bit of light reading. Joe Slater says, Madness of Crowds, Douglas Murray, great book. Indeed. Pastime says, have you heard of my uncle Michael Brody? Of course. Yeah, from Manchester. I remember when Michael Brody fought Injin Chi. A silent statement toe. Is that the name? I'm just going to call you Silent. Says, have you read any books on psychoanalysis? Yes. Carl Jung. Read several of his books. Freud. You know, anybody who's looking to get into psychology, psychiatry, you know, just to study, then you can't go wrong starting off with Carl Jung. And of course, Edward Bernays in terms of applied psychology. Because Bernays, being the nephew, the double nephew of Sigmund Freud, he was a prodigy of Freud. But he took the knowledge that he had of psychology and then applied it. He was like a hired gun for corporations and governments and so on to run advertising campaigns, propaganda campaigns, etc. So that's another book I can recommend to you guys, is the book which was written in the 1920s by Edward Bernays called Propaganda. Word of the day says the Netflix CEOs are related to Edward Bernays. Yeah, the co-founder of Netflix, Mark Randolph, is related to Edward Bernays. That's right. Right. Some people saying strange stuff about AJ. Guess people are trolling here. And I will only be talking about boxing here, folks. You know, I deviate a little bit there with the book recommendations, but I want to stick on boxing as a topic. I don't want to start veering off into other directions. Big up. Is it Aderie? Is that how to pronounce your name? Aderie Pennant. Big up. Boxing Buzz. I haven't seen the Sonny Edwards fight, Boxing Buzz. I didn't realize it was actually happening on a Friday. They caught me off guard there. Pidge, to answer your question, I would say yes. Harry Travolta says, I met Tyson Fury at his speaking tour and gave him a tin of Happy Shopper peas for a present. He went, I'll cherish these. That seems like a gift that he would appreciate. Reflex says, Hatman, if you were in boxing now, who would be your trainer? Who would I seek out as a trainer? It's a good question. Who would I seek out as a trainer? I think Shane McGuigan's a good trainer. But the thing is, I was more of a pressure fighter, although I could fight moving around as well. But when I had to fight a pressure fight, would Shane McGuigan be able to give me everything I require to prepare me properly to fight a pressure fight? I don't know. But I do like Shane McGuigan as a trainer. I like what he's done with Lawrence Okolie. He's done fantastic work with Lawrence Okolie. Just look at how magnificently Lawrence Okolie performed in his last fight against Glavatsky. Fantastic performance, tremendous improvements. Ibrahim says UK trainers are horrible. Well, 20 years ago I would have agreed with you, but I think these days there are some good UK trainers. I think Peter Fury's a good trainer. I think Shane McGuigan's a good trainer. I think Adam Booth has improved a lot. I know he's getting a lot of stick at the moment because some of his fighters have lost, Josh Kelly and what have you. But I think Shane McGuigan is really good. Karma says Shane McGuigan is my trainer. Well, you're in good hands then. Tommy says, what do you think of Chisora's second walk demand against the contract? Well, that's all been sorted out. And they're storming the teacup. You know, Derek Chisora probably just trying to hype himself up for the fight. Jared Thompson says, I think the fight being behind closed doors helped Okolie. I suspect you're probably right, you know. I suspect you're right. Dwight says, what do you think about Tunde? I think Tunde is actually a good trainer. I just think as a manager, that's where I'm not as convinced. But as a trainer, I think Tunde is a good trainer, truth be told. It's just his management that I'm not really a fan of. SC says, what are your thoughts on the Michael Hunter and the PED stuff? Yeah, it's disturbing, isn't it? It's disturbing. My initial reaction when I heard about Michael Hunter missing a PED test, I said, don't do this to us, Michael. Don't do this to us because we want to see this fight. So I know he apparently came out and came up with some explanation as to why he missed that test. All I can tell you is I hope he don't miss another one. whenever the next test is scheduled for, he better be there and he better pass the test because that's a fight I really want to see. Okay, Olamide Doherty says, Hatman, when sparring, what type of headgear do you prefer? 1 second here. Well, currently I got a rival headgear. Okay, we got Chris Andre in the chat. We got Chris, and any of you who haven't subscribed to Chris Andre's channel yet, seriously, guys, what are you waiting for? Chris Andre is one of the best boxing analysts you will ever come across. I kid you not. So everybody needs to go over and subscribe to Chris Andre Boxing. And Chris says, I'll be gutted if Hunter fails a PED test. He's such an exciting prospect, especially against the bigger heavyweights. His speedy raiding style is going to give some guys fits. I'll be gutted if he's out of the picture. Me too. So I hope that him missing that PED test was a genuine mistake and that he's not actually covering up something. I hope. Because I really want to see this Michael Hunter Filip Hrgović fight. Big up Christian Lewis or Louis. Glad you're enjoying the Patreon. Yes, I've got back on the serial killer series. I've done multiple Patreon podcasts about serial killers. And the latest one being on the Butcher of Rostov. One of the most grisly cases of a serial killer ever. Big up Grievous. Boxmind says we don't tell jokes. We surely don't. We don't run no joke. We don't tell jokes. Okay, I'm going to end this one here, people. So shout out to everybody for locking in. I'm going to bring this live stream to an end. And yeah, everybody enjoy your Saturday. I'm out.